Well, I would like to welcome you from every place in the world again. Good to see you all, and good morning, afternoon, or evening. We have this architecture session now divided in two parts, and the first part will zoom in on the TAC, the Theater Architecture Competition for students. And the second part will be about acoustics, and we have two speakers there who will talk with us about their work and the issues they deal with. But now we're going to start with the TAC. This competition is held every 4 years, and the brief is spread out quite recently, but we'd like to explain you a little bit more about it. And yeah, we are trying to get this competition a little bit getting alive, actually. Tim will start with a presentation about the brief and give some explanation about it. And after that, Selma will coach us into a little workshop where we can discuss the brief further. I hope you will enjoy it, and of course that you get enthusiastic and join the competition. Tim, can I invite you to start and share?
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Let's hope it works. Okay, is everybody seeing that all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
Good. Okay, so I've been organising the Oystack Theatre Architecture Competition for a few years. I think this is probably about my fourth one. This is the 11th competition. As Mike has said, it's normally every 4 years, but in this case, because World Stage Design was delayed by a year, it's actually going to be 5 years. So I'm just going to explain for those who aren't aware what the competition is and tell you about this year's brief. So what is the Theatre Architecture Competition? It's an ideas competition, so it's not going to be built. And the intention is to explore theatre design concepts. It's to try and encourage young designers and architects to really think about what it is to design a theatre. What are the special characteristics that you need to think about? And originally, it used to be organised to coincide with PQ, and there would be an exhibition at PQ. And then for the last one, we rearranged the times to coincide with World Stage Design. So it now runs on the World Stage Design cycle. It's mainly aimed at architecture students and young practitioners, but we do say that we welcome if they can collaborate with theatre people, be they directors, designers, technicians, actors. And we have in the past had 1 or 2 very good entries, particularly I remember two times ago when it was in Berlin, a group of Canadian, an architect, a director and a designer collaborated. The best selected entries, usually 25 or 30, will be exhibited at World Stage Design, so they will be part of the physical exhibition. There is an entry fee of $60 US, and then there is pretty generous cash prizes available, which you can see there. So just to give you a flavour of previous ones, the last one was at World Stage Design in Taiwan, and this was the site that was selected for the competition, which was an interesting location. It was a disused basketball stadium, had been in use as a car park, had lost its roof, if it ever had one. And this was the setting for the previous competition. So we have a jury who decide who the winner should be. And there is usually a chair and then either 4 or 3 theatre architects. And we always have one practitioner who is not an architect, but a theatre person. And actually in 2017, that was Abby Cohen, who's our new president. So here's the jury having a break from its deliberations. And just show you some of the prize winners, the sort of work we got. This was the first prize winner, who actually came from Taiwan, which was for a very loose, informal kind of series of stages and facilities built within this stadium, with a lot of planting as well. This was the second prize, very different, was from Russia. And this rather beautiful pavilion sitting in a pool with performances taking place both inside it and outside it, using the existing tiering of the amphitheater to look at performances and projections onto this water-covered box. This was the third one from China. And they had a rather interesting idea of a series of stages on tracks. So these stages could slide up and down to different audiences sitting along this long, thin amphitheater space. So that's a flavour of the sort of entries we got last time. Now I'm just going to talk about the location and the brief for this competition. The site is at the Banff Center. This is 130 kilometers to the west of Calgary, and which is where the main World Stage Design event will be. The Banff Center is a rather extraordinary learning organization. It started as an adult learning organization, and it now has developed into a really extraordinary place, more like a university. And they focus on excellence in artistic and creative development. They do leadership courses and all sorts of interesting stuff. And they have this quite incredible location just at the start of the Rocky Mountains, which some members of the OISTAT EC and GB actually visited 3 years ago. And I went there, it had just started to snow and it was very, very beautiful. So the competition challenge is to devise an adaptable outdoor theatre structure which can extend the rather short summer season which they have in the Rockies here. So this is the campus plan. So it's not unlike a university campus. Has some very good buildings and surrounded by this incredible landscape. And if you can see my pointer here, there is what's called the Shore Amphitheater. And this is a current amphitheater, and the brief is to redesign this. So here are some shots of the site, obviously here in winter, and here in summer. It's very beautiful. This is the location plan for the amphitheater, and it sits next to the building you saw in the earlier photographs, which is called the Kinnear Center. And that building provides most of the support facilities for audiences. So foyer space, toilets, bars, and so on are are available in that building. So the amphitheater itself is just an amphitheater at present. There it is again in summertime. So it currently can seat, I think, about 200 people on the stone steps, and up to about 1,500 people if you use the grass bank behind it. And like the best Greek amphitheaters, the backdrop to the stage is the landscape, which is amazing. This is a cross section through the site. So you can see there's quite a significant slope across the site. So I think there are opportunities to sort of create things that are underground or dug into this hillside in various ways. This is how it's used now. So they build a temporary stage with a roof on it, but everybody else is out of doors. It's highly climate dependent, as I've already said. There's a very short summer season. I think they only do performances at the moment for about 6 or 8 weeks. There is snow in Calgary from October to April. And even in the summer months, the weather is unpredictable. So storms come in off the mountains, as you can sort of see one coming here, I think. And they can get sudden rainstorms and high winds, which can be very disruptive of performances. Things like classical music are particularly sensitive because the musicians get very worried about their instruments getting wet. So as a result, they have frequent cancellations. So the brief itself, these are the sort of wish list we've worked up with the Banff Center. So they are engaged with this. And if a proposal came forward that was kind of realistic and doable, they might pick it up, but there is no promise that that will happen. So they would like to capitalize on the natural beauty and stunning views of the site, which you've seen, facilitate safe and efficient operation for at least 10 months of the year, create a flexible space to support arts performances and events with an audience capacity ranging from 200 to 2,000, including banquets for up to 400. To connect to the existing support facilities, including public washrooms, foyer spaces, and so on in the adjacent building, which I've mentioned. And due to the climate challenges, the thinking is that the venue will provide a secure, smaller venue in the winter months, but will be able to open itself up and transform into a larger, partly covered, partly open air event space in the summer months. And other than the performance space itself, there need to be backstage facilities. So artist support, including dressing rooms, washrooms, and green rooms need to be provided somewhere, which might be underground, might be within the existing building. This is the timeline. So the brief and the documents are now available on the World Stage Design website. We need to do more work to publicize it and advertise it, and anything anyone who's here can do to spread the word in their region would be much appreciated. We've set a deadline for questions of the end of this month. The answers to the questions will be posted a week later. And the submission portal, because this will all be submitted online, will open on the 30th of November, but it won't close until the 30th of April. So the real deadline for submissions is 30th of April next year. The jury will meet in May, hopefully in Banff, so they can see the site. The results will be announced at the beginning of June, and there will then be an exhibition and prize giving at World Stage Design. So that's it from me. Please spread the word in your region. And this is where you can find the information, but I think if you just put in World Stage Design, you'll find it quite easily. So we're now going to run a little design workshop, which Selma is going to explain to us. Selma.
Thank you, Tim. Actually, we did have a little slot for if you have any questions regarding the kind of process of the competition, especially if you are going to be promoting it in your region or if you're a student and you're online. So if there's any questions, I think you press the raise hand icon and ask a question to Tim. Do we have anything?
I didn't see questions yet.
Okay. Okay. So if not, we're going to do a little workshop, more like a brainstorming, and going to break into 3 breakout rooms. So if anybody has never experienced the breakout room, it's not too scary. Suyun will send a little message to you that says join a particular meeting room. You just have to click join. And once you get there in your group, you elect a leader who will be the spokesperson for when you report back to the main room. And while there, Tim, Micah, and I, one of us will be in your breakout room. And we will have a whiteboard that you can all draw and type on with your ideas that you're developing in your brainstorming session. Then we join the main group and have a little discussion. And the purpose of the session is to kind of based on, hopefully you've had a chance to read the brief, but Tim has explained it anyway. So based on that, what you see as the most pressing issues of the competition and kind of brainstorm on that about its significance and maybe some of the consequences, not necessarily a design solution, but just understanding the problem that's the competition wants to be solved. And the deliverable, when you get back to the main group, is the whiteboard with sketches, words, lists of what you concluded, basically. Okay, so Suyun, I think you're going to throw us all into a breakout room? I'm hoping.
Yes, it has been assigned, so I will open the breakout room right now.
Yes, please. And we have 10 minutes to complete our exercise.
Okay.
And you'll get a warning before you have to close the breakout room. So don't panic.
And you need to elect a leader.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Hello, hello.
So we had a very small group, but we had a discussion nonetheless. So maybe we just take turns. Micah and Tim, if you were all able to grab your whiteboard.
Yes, I was group 1. Shall I start?
Yes, why not?
We were also in a very small group. And there, for one moment, there was Antonia, but she didn't show herself. So we didn't speak to real students, though Chai is a little bit a student. We have made a drawing. This one. Sam, can I give you the word, or Chai, do you want to say something?
Go ahead, Micah.
No. You had a really nice philosophical approach, I think. And you started the drawing.
Okay, it's I'll say it's the first time for me. I mean, to share a white paper while drawing a sketch, so with somebody else. So I just put a frame and then a panorama of that mountain with the red lines, and then Micah, Lisa, Chai had added with me like on it. And Chai has asked, what do you mean with what I draw? So I said, I don't want to be a philosophical saying that don't express what you're drawing. If the audience can see or get an impression by themselves about the drawing, either if it's matching what the artist is seeing or not, but don't express your painting or your drawings.
For the record, you were right. It is quite clear what you had drawn. I just wanted to confirm, but I loved the philosophical response that I got instead. I think it was nice as a drawing exercise, as a shared piece of paper, and kind of symbols and images. To give another 2 cents on it, I liked the idea of a frame, which Bassam took, and I also took separately, but ended up coming together. My frame is much smaller, it's the purple one. But I think these ideas of drawing these things brought in some nice ideas of placement of audience and inclusion of the outer world and this architecture, which is really open, and maybe even the possibility of raising the audience up. There's mountain sides, and I think it really changes the relationship to how you are mentally in relation with space. Have like balcony seating next to mountains, picture frames, green, blue, purple, and red.
Thank you, Chai. Thank you, Bassam.
Nice.
Sharing. Yes. I stop sharing now. Group 2.
Okay. Tim, are you there too?
Yeah. So do I do share screen to find the whiteboard?
Yeah, share screen. And then you choose the whiteboard.
That's a new one.
Oh.
Should I be able to see the old one?
I hope so. I'm hoping I'm going to see it. Did you save it before you quit?
I did.
Okay. I hope I don't have the same problem.
Anyway,
Okay.
we didn't actually draw anything. We wrote some words down, but Jason was volunteered as the spokesperson.
Voluntold, I believe. Yeah, we talked about some technical components of the competition more than how to resolve the competition, I think. One of the points I brought up is that we, in the Canadian schools, the final presentations are on the beginning to mid-April. And so if it's to be done by students, then it might not coincide very well with the timing. But, you know, in the end, students have nothing but time, right? So I certainly offered, I'll add it to the spreadsheet that was sent out this morning as a reminder to all the Canadian schools. I think there are about 11 accredited schools of architecture, including University of Calgary, which will be I'm sure there'll be huge uptake in that. And then try to cross-reference them with Canadian schools with good theater programs, which University of Alberta in Edmonton has, which is a couple hours away from Calgary. And then we talked about some of the context of the space, you know, of the sensitivity of the site, getting materials there, but not really being too concerned. One thing I'm really excited about for this project and this ideas competition is the idea of outdoor performance in the wintertime, which is not something that we have really embraced very well in Canada, but we're starting to embrace our winters a little bit stronger. So I'm in Winnipeg, and we didn't talk about this in our breakout, but we have -30, -35 winters here in mid-January, and we have a outdoor restaurant that opens on the ice. And so it can be quite, when you embrace a winter culture, it can be quite fun, right? So I think one of my group is from Sweden, and we can relate to that outdoor activities that embrace the climate that you're in. And then I think the last point that's kind of brought up is Canada's going through Indigenous reconciliation right now, and so that it'd be important to include maybe points from the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People into the brief, or some kind of collaboration with the Indigenous groups from the area who consider that their traditional territory. There's a website called nativeland.ca that will have a mapping of traditional territories. And we also did consider, talked about Chicago's Millennial Park and some other outdoor spaces that we can use as precedent reference spaces. Did I miss anything, Tim?
No, I think that's more or less it. We talked a little bit about structures and, should it be a removable structure or a folding structure, or and the need to tread lightly on that site because it's such a beautiful site. Whatever you do has got to be done with a lot of sensitivity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so from my group, I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to rescue my whiteboard. Oh, I have the same problem as Tim. We did do a nice drawing.
Very nice.
Yes, and I
was-
saved it, but
It was like the night watch.
Selma, it's automatically saved in your documents folder. There's a folder called Zoom, and there it's in.
okay, let's see.
But maybe I can start talking.
Yes, you can start
while you
talking, and then I will
Yes,
bring
please.
it up.
Yeah.
There it is. Okay, can you see it now?
You have to close the old one, I think.
Yeah, here we go. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had a rather small group, and we had 2 other participants, but their mic was muted, so we weren't sure how to connect with them. And I think our 3 kind of points were about the climate, the view, and the kind of transition maybe as this, the competition wants to be a permanent, more 10-month structure, where there's something about its current temporal nature, which is maybe something very powerful, might be lost. And they kind of all came together in maybe something that is a very light structure that provides shelter, and doesn't block the scenic view, but also grows and shrinks as the structure actually grows and shrinks to kind of remind you of that seasonal drama, although you're clearly living it. That is also a performance almost aspect. As an audience, you are participating in nature in a kind of performance because there's a short gap that you can do this, and whether there's a way to capture that in the structure. So that was our small groups.
And
do you have something to add, Louis?
Yeah, the trees are also important because if we grow, if we go with the seasons, Indian summer in BC is beautiful. So if we could, around the theater, plant trees, not blocking the view to the mountains, those trees can also show the season, and it gives some shelter for strong winds, etc. And indeed, in summertime, no structure, open in the air, and then the structure grows with autumn and winter time and diminishes in spring. That's the idea.
Yeah. So the trees are becoming part of the structure in this case.
I like,
Yes,
I
but the
like
trees-
the idea that it's a landscaping project.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right. So are there, kind of having gone through this exercise, any kind of questions or more brainstorming ideas?
You are also allowed to put them in the chat so we can read it for you if you want.
That's right.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna go for this is no bad ideas, but warm seats, like roller coaster seats, where the bum is already warm for you. And maybe there's that thing that like comes down. So, you know, blanket is not quite sanitary, but you have seats which can be heated in the wintertime. And maybe they have like a bar that is warm so that the top of your thighs stay warm as well. Or also in Japan, you have onsen, right, which are natural hot springs. I don't really know what the hot spring situation is there, but they also have like foot hot springs so that you just put your feet in, and considering feet is one of the best ways to put heat into your body, that can become something. If you control the temperature in the summer, it can be very cooling because you have ones that are, you know, just like running in from the river, and then they have hot spring ones which heat you up, and it's kind of a nice nature nature-esque way to
Nature
Hot.
experience.
Hot tubs instead of seats.
Right.
just warm the whole body.
Yeah, but you
I
can
will-
have group
I
tubs.
like the idea that rather than struggling to create a roof that can take snow loads, you actually don't have a roof, but you have an environment with a seat.
Right.
Also, as recently working in an outdoor venue, tents suck, cleaning tents suck. They get really ugly and really dirty quite quickly. Other materials would be costly to bring up there and heavy. You know, like if it was like glass or something, you know, like nice that you could wipe down. These overhanging structures just are really hard to take care of in the long run. And I feel like they wouldn't want much maintenance.
Yeah. That's great. Tim, do you have some kind of wrapping comments to make? And then, because I'm looking at the time, we wanted to wrap up before the second part of the presentation.
No, not really. I mean, the brief is there to see. I think these comments have been really interesting. And again, please, can I ask everyone to do what you can to publicize this in your region, and maybe alert architecture schools in your region. And usually we get a pretty good uptake. I mean, we would expect to have over 200 entries typically. Has gone as high as 300. John, you got your hand up.
Yes, I remember the saplings in front of the National Theatre in London going in 1976. They're now 7 meters tall. They haven't been managed. There's been no interplanting, so the view to the river is very obscured. And although they're beautiful, there's, you know, they do grow. I know I'm talking of getting on for 50 years now, but it is a problem.
Yeah, trees grow.
Not if you trim them like bonsai,
That's right.
in which case it becomes an ongoing, extremely beautiful growth, which is
And the Kinnear building, which overlooks the site, you know, has a magnificent view out to the mountains. They probably wouldn't welcome that view being obscured by too many trees.
Right.
No, but I think the trees could be nice as a kind of, how do you say that, embracing the audience and leave it open, and so it's kind of the side walls of the auditorium,
Yeah.
and then they can grow as high as you want. It's nature, it's great.
I will say that
Okay.
in
One more thing.
I was just going to say, in non-pandemic times, I will say that the Banff Center has a fantastic gardening and landscaping staff. So there is a team that could manage tree upkeep.
Right.
Okay. Does anyone have any other comments or criticisms or anything?
Just one last one, Jim, if I may, is Banff
Yeah.
has some wandering elk through the town. And so to have elk integrated into the theater might be a fun idea too.
There is something in the brief about the wildlife.
Fantastic.
Apparently they have to keep the noise down because it upsets the wildlife.
Yeah, that's an important thing too.
Yeah.
I don't see
Right.
any questions anymore. So thank you all for joining. At least I thought using the whiteboard together was really fun. We can use it in other ways as well, I think. Yes, so thank you. And I think we have 5 minutes break before we start at 3 o'clock sharp with the next part of the meeting.
Thank you, Micah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Can we keep the channel open?
Yes. We
Yeah,
have-
yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
don't
so
close it.
Now you're free to chit chat.
I just want to ask, Chai, where are you from?
Just,
Are you?
it's just my, do you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
It is just, this is my consideration, and perhaps I'm coming from Italy. We have not in Italy a place where we can see Cambia Vista. What you see in Drottningholm or in the Český Krumlov, the only two theaters in the world where you can see the scenery changing. And it's 30 years that I am trying to propose to my government, my administrators, to have in Italy a place where we can realize changing sceneries. So I am here to, I hope to have the support of Oistat on this idea. That's it. I hope you grasp what I try to say in my poor English.
Yes, thank you, Francesco. Are you also in the architecture commission, or what's your relationship with Oistat?
I'm a,
Maybe you just say it in
I'm afraid
general.
I don't understand.
Are you a member of Oistat already?
Not already.
Not already. So you're new, or is that
Yeah.
good? And are you an architect?
I'm an historian of theater architecture.
Okay. Well, welcome.
Thank
And I
you.
think you can send an email to Oystad with your topic.
What you see in my background, this is everything of this comes from Italy. In the whole Europe and the whole world, we have not now in Italy a place where you can see something like this. You have to go to Sweden or to Bohemia, Český Krumlov, two places in the world that you can actually see a changing scenery. But we don't have a place in Italy where you can experience something that Italy has invented and gifted to all the world. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, we'll take that with us.
Thanks for the gift.
Yes.
Someone asked where I'm from. I'm from Brooklyn. But I was a student of Joe Pino, who used to be the chair of the Sound Design Commission. And that is my connection to Oystad. But I
Are you
do
an,
multimedia artist.
are you an architect?
I am not. I am here because I'm really bad at being on time to things, and I meant to come to this sound design meeting. But I also am very intrigued by sculpture, and architecture scares me. It's a little too much responsibility for safety and public safety codes. But I'm a sculptor. I'm a sculptor as well, and so I was curious to listen in on the meeting. Yeah, but not an architect.
Great,
Not
you are
necessary to
welcome.
be.
Thank you. And on the trees, I don't know if this is from that guy, but there's this artist who bends trees into sculpture, and his name is
Giuseppe Pennone.
Axel Erlandson, and I don't know if this is quite his, but he's known for it, and he makes like love seats and just like these like benches out of naturally growing trees, and he uses these like fast growing trees and puts things in their way to bend them, and they can be quite sparse, but they don't provide much in the terms of foliage, which would both block view but also help with sound infiltration into the wildlife. I don't know if that's anything. And also it would be an extremely permanent installation, but to build a theater in a forest naturally over 80 years using this technique would be a lovely idea.
Sounds good. Okay, we have lost a few people. Maybe they will join some, but I think it's good to start with the acoustic lectures. And yeah, I'm really proud to announce our two speakers for today. We have Nicole van Hout and Eckhart Kahle. Very welcome. Nicole van Hout is an acoustic scientist and works for Level Acoustics and Vibrations in Eindhoven, a spin-off company from the Technical University in the Netherlands. And besides advisory work in the Netherlands and abroad, they work on research and knowledge transfer. They participate in big European research projects, and they organize master classes and workshops in their own acoustic lab. Eckhart Kahle is founder of his company Kahle Acoustics in Brussels and professor at the National Conservatorium in Karlsruhe in Germany. And with his years of experience and an extensive project portfolio in the performing arts, Eckhart Kahle is an internationally renowned acoustician. As a classic viola player, he has also played in orchestras such as the European Community Youth Orchestra and the Chamber Orchestra of Europe. So with all this experience, with a wide range of theater and music buildings and a long list of famous architects you've both worked with, we are very proud to have you here. And I will give Nicole the first word, and she will start her lecture on the growing ask for multifunctionality of auditoria and how to deal with that. And after that, Eckhart will follow with his lecture that will be more about the acoustics of the auditoria itself and how to implement the acoustics together with, for example, techniques. So Nicole, can I invite you to start and share your
Yes,
screen?
thank you. Share the screen. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
I hope so. Okay. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you also for the invitation to join this congress. I would like to point out and to discuss with you the wish or desire of multi-purpose halls, also in theaters. Actually, the desire or required multi-purpose functionality. We see this in every project actually we work on. And purpose-built venues that serve purely as concert halls, for example, or opera houses or theaters are rather rare today. And yeah, the advantage of multi-purpose halls is that they can be used, of course, for different types of performances under one roof with proportionally lower costs. And besides, we experience that experimental performances are getting more and more popular, so to say. So also that has to do with the wish of multi-purpose use of halls. But maybe you can imagine there's related to the acoustics of these halls, we encounter some challenges. The acoustics should meet a wide range of functions, and drama, for example, asks for a different acoustic character than a chamber music concert. And to be able to organize, for example, big events and festivals, the merging of halls is often also asked for. The main acoustic challenges we often encounter in projects are listed here. So sound insulation of internal partitions within the building, also the sound insulation of facades, and variable acoustics, so room acoustics. And in this presentation, I would like to address each of these challenges briefly by some projects. And in every project, I will focus on only one of these three challenges because of the time we have. First, sound insulation of internal partitions. Here you see an impression of the factory in Manchester. It's a kind of machine in which all thinkable art and theater performances should be possible. The client, Manchester International Festival, they describe themselves as one of the leading worldwide incubators for new cutting-edge art. And they bring together artists from different art forms and backgrounds to create dynamic, innovative, and forward-thinking new work. So you can imagine what kind of requirements they have for this building. Here below in the sheet, you can see a link to a tour. You can enter it if you would like to see more of the project inside the building. I have some images later on in the presentation. This is actually how the building is set up with a theater. I'll show it here. And a warehouse, as they call it. And they can combine it in every way, actually. Here you see a section of it. And here you see the different configurations of the decoupling and coupling of the different halls. So they can use it as three separate halls. They can use it as a theater with a stage actually in the warehouse. They can use it as a small theater with a large warehouse. and they can combine all the halls together to, for example, for a big festival event. This is an image of the theater hall. Next one is an image of this warehouse. And here you see the movable wall system to decouple the warehouse into two separate halls. And this is when it's combined as one big hall, the warehouse. So, for example, for pop concerts or something like that. This is a schematic overview of the walls that are applied in this project. Movable walls, all 4 in total. So 2 to separate the theater from the warehouse, and 2 to separate the warehouse into 2 different halls. And here you can see the requirement that was set for the sound insulation to reach between theater and warehouse and in between the halls of the warehouse. It's rather high, so it's quite a challenge to reach these sound insulation values. So that's why in both situations 2 movable walls are applied. And in this case, between the theater and the warehouse, 2 walls of 45 dB are applied with an air gap of 2 meters in between, and it's fully acoustic dilated in this way. The other situation in the warehouse itself, it's done by 2 movable walls of 40 dB, also with a big air gap, and here no fully acoustic dilatation was possible actually, so we have also flanking noise. That's why, also a lower sound insulation could be reached. And each wall, to make this possible, is approximately 200 millimeters thick. And in between these walls, you have a big air gap. So you need quite some space to make this possible. It's the same for the other construction in the warehouse itself. And then also sound absorption is applied to these movable walls. One reason to have sound absorption for the room acoustics in the halls itself, but also to have sound absorption in the air gap in between those movable walls to absorb the sound in this buffer zone of 2 meters. The movable walls can be stored to the facade to make it one room, and the other walls can be lifted actually. And in the next slide, I show you some pictures so you can have an idea about how many gaskets, for example, have to be applied to get the sound in this insulation. Also, these are parts of the lifted movable walls. It's also built up with steel plates. So the mass of these plates are also very high. So it does ask something. It's not a ready on the shelf product, so to say. This is a picture from the build side. So you have a view from here, the theater into the warehouse. And here you see actually the space where this lifted movable walls will be applied. And to set the requirements for the sound insulation of the movable walls, we made an auralization for different sound insulations of these walls. We made audible what sound levels could be expected in the theater due to an event in the warehouse. And so the client could give feedback on what sound level they thought was acceptable in the theater hall. And I think, the auralization is really a good tool to also regulate expectations of clients and users, for example. The next challenge is about the sound insulation of facades. Here you see a picture of the Wiley Theater in Dallas. The theater wanted actually to open itself to the public environment, to create really a connection between the theater and the people around it. So the foyer in this situation is located below the theater chamber, and other rooms like rehearsal rooms, dressing rooms, etc. are located above the theater chamber. And so that made it possible to have a really fully glass facade around the theater chamber. Here you see some pictures of the building. In this one you see the stage area actually, and in the back the seats, the theater hall. Here from inside, yeah, you see loads of glass partitions all around the hall itself. Some nice picture for the technicians maybe attending to this presentation. And here you see actually the two main configurations of this theater. So really the theater configuration with all the seats and balconies included. And on the right side, it's the flat floor configurations. So the balconies can be lifted and the seats can be stored in the basement. I have a short movie that's then you can really see how dynamic this hall is. Let's see if it works out. To share it. Put it here. So please have a look if you want to see the total movie. It's a little bit too short to show it all. But in this case, you could already see, maybe in the movie, at least the next slide about the highway and the traffic noise around it. But also, the building is situated in the flight paths of the airport of Dallas. And so airplanes that approach and leave the airport fly across the theater. So the exposure of traffic noise around the glazing facade is quite high. Here you can see an overview of this noise load. And also we did measurements on site, and we used the spectrum of the traffic to make an auralization again. To make hearable actually what can be heard in the theater chamber using different types of glazing. And the requirement that was set was 25 dB maximum background noise. And so, yeah, actually option 2 came out as a result, also to apply double glazing facade with an air gap in between. That was also measured in the mock-up to have the real dimensions of the facade, the height and the width. And fortunately, the requirements were met. So the background noise level of 25 dB was reachable by applying this facade. And then the last challenge is about variable room acoustics. Taipei Performing Arts Center. This venue houses 3 halls. You see an overview. At the left side, you see the Grand Theater. Then in the middle, the Proscenium Playhouse. And at the right side, the Multiform Theater. I have some images from the halls. So this is the Proscenium Playhouse, the Grand Theater, the Multiform Theater, and then the last one is a combination of the Grand and the Multiform Theater. They call it Super Theater because it's really super in dimensions. Here in some plans, in orange the Grand Theater, and then in green the Multiform Theater, and in between the yellow zone is a kind of buffer space in between the 2 halls, or a space that can be coupled to one of the theaters or to both of them, so to make one big hall in section. And then on some higher levels, there's the Proscenium Playhouse. And in the next slide, this one, you actually see all the possible combinations that can be made in this building. So quite a lot. And the functionalities, especially for the Grand Theater, was enormously actually. So it should house drama, Chinese and Western opera, dance, modern ballet, musicals, traditional and modern music, and even symphonic music. And the Multiform Theater should be able to house drama, experimental performances, and multidisciplinary performances. And so there's a wide range actually in desired reverberation time for different functionalities. You see a very short overview. For example, for drama, a desired reverberation time of about 1 second is wished, and for symphonic music, for example, 2 seconds. So there's a difference of a factor 2. So that's a wide range. And if we see which tools you could apply, then you can play with the volume. That's one, sound absorption. And of course, you could use an electroacoustic system. But for example, if you use the volume, then to double the reverberation time, you need to double the volume, more or less. And actually the same counts for sound absorption. If you want to halve the reverberation time, you need to double the surface area of sound absorption. So that's enormous, actually, what you need to apply to get this range of reverberation times. But of course, you could also apply electroacoustic systems. They can be very useful and helpful, but my opinion still is not to be able to reach the same quality. Still, you can hear the difference with the natural acoustics. So it's a little bit artificial sound, and sometimes you get a different perception of the whole. That it's not really, really meeting how the whole looks like. So a little bit different perception. To end the presentation, what we did in these 2 halls, here in the Grand Theater, actually the variable acoustics are applied in the ceiling. There can be applied curtains all around it. Here a heavyweight curtain that also cuts off actually this volume in the back. And there are sound traps. They can be open and closed. If they are open, then the sound absorption can be seen from the hall. It's like 10 centimeters thick. And if all these absorption is applied, then the reverberation time is about 1.2 seconds. If we close all the curtains and the sound traps, then the reverberation time goes up till 1.6 seconds. So a difference of 0.4 seconds, more or less, but you have to apply really a lot of materials and to close off some volume. For the multipurpose theater, there are actually movable walls applied within the hall itself, underneath the balconies. You can see it here by the red lines. And they have one side of the movable wall is reflecting and one side is sound absorbing. So you can make use of it. So if they are stored in the back, so it's open underneath the balconies, and the ceiling of the balconies are also sound absorbing, then the reverberation time is 1.2 seconds. You can close them totally or partly to have some lightning openings, for example. But then you can make use of cutting off the volume and making it reflective or absorbing. If the reflecting side is facing the hall, then the reverberation time is about 1.2 seconds. You cut off some volume, you cut off also some sound absorbing material in the ceilings of the balconies. If you turn them, so the absorbing side of the walls is facing the hall, then the reverberation time is about 1.0 seconds. And actually, so for multipurpose halls, it's very hard to reach the desired acoustics for all functions. You wouldn't reach actually the same quality of acoustics like a purpose-built venue, but of course, you do gain a lot in functionality. So I think it's all about trying to find the best balance in between functionalities and acoustics. And yeah, I hope to hear back your feedback from the participants later on after the presentation of Eckhart.
Thank you very much, Nicole. That's a lot of information, but very interesting. I think it's good if Eckhart Tale can take over because of time, and then we have afterwards some time to discuss and answer questions. Eckhart, are you there?
Unless somebody directly has a question for Nicole, go ahead. While I share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. So basically, I'll be a little bit more practical and keep it more to the theater. And thank you very much, Nicole. That was a nice overview of everything that is possible or everything that is beginning to be possible. So the wild things that we all love. Let's go to some more concrete ones, what I call coordination, integration, and interaction with theater technical installations. So half I'll be talking a little bit about architecture, but half, it as Nicole says, a theater, what is a theater today? A theater is not really only a theater will do many things. And I will talk about lighting. There is always, I called it when I was drafting something on a piece of paper, the conflict between theater technology and acoustics. No, let's talk about coordination, integration, and interaction. We are all friends, like Torsten knows. I can be tough, but normally we try to find compromises. Good. What am I talking about? That's a typical German opera house long section. You see one lighting bridge, a second lighting bridge, a third lighting bridge. Oh, they're all happy, and that's what you need for lighting. That's all well and done, and this opera house actually doesn't work too badly, but still, if you actually look at the opera house from the stage, that's what you see. And as I say in my title, where are my reflections? I get a little bit of reflection from that one, I get a little bit from that one, but the measurements actually confirm that over distance, my sound gets much weaker. and more weaker than it should be. And it's quite clear. It's a lot of the sound just basically goes into those lighting bridges. Nicole said, we can happily use them to do some variable acoustics, to either close them to get something back, which we were planning in this one. We may actually go to an electronic solution, which is kind of the same. But basically, yes, we need lights, we need lighting positions. But then the small acoustician says, can I get some acoustics as well? And that's kind of part one. I think it's possible. It needs understanding from each other. It needs understanding of theater technology from the acoustician, and hopefully some understanding of acoustics from the lighting designers and or directly from the clients and technical directors. This is in the same theater, I won't give a name, but basically that's the theater of the opera house, and it's even more black. So basically there is even less reflection surfaces and even more conflict between acoustic projection and lighting. Good, that was the ceiling. So you can say basically there's a ceiling, but what about the side walls? Requirements for side lighting have increased a lot over the last years. I actually fully understand it. I like going to theaters, and basically you need those lighting positions. And this is a funny example, ignore all the colored lines. That's an opera house currently under design in China, and that was basically designed between a theater planner and an architect without an acoustician on board. So that's what we found when we started, basically a gigantic double lighting slot on the side. Then you can say, oh yes, but you have some surfaces still. But if you actually look at it in plan, the surface that I have is absolutely parallel to any sound lines from the stage. So basically, these lighting positions are big gaping holes for the sound. We sometimes actually use that one, but here we didn't want to use it. When we use it, we call it the Pac-Man. So basically, it's the Pac-Man ceiling or the Pac-Man sidewalls. It eats all sound that gets in, and there's not much chance of ever seeing it again, or even better, hearing it again. So what can you do? The lighting designer needs some lights here. The acoustician wants some reflections. The acoustician, the typical one is, let's close that one. And then when I actually find the verse is the famous theater flaps. You can close it for acoustics, but the moment you need a light, you open the flap and you stick your light out. And what happens? There is light that is required in the theater, so all of these flaps generally are open, and they're actually, once again, sound-eating lighting positions. What we wanted to do here more is, that was the first question, can we actually continue the balcony fronts, possibly actually extend this balcony? And the moment you're having a balcony front, you can actually create some reflections with it. So basically, the idea is to give the lighting designer the required lighting positions. But for example, if there is a catwalk, or if there's a position where the lighting people are standing, there's normally not a light in front of their knees. So then I can actually do the reflector. And that's actually directly more or less the solution. We finally don't have continuous balcony fronts, but we take the language of the balcony fronts and design kind of a railing to the platforms that were in there anyways. In the end, it has somewhat changed. The platforms have changed in height, but the idea is the same. Where there is a platform, there is an area which is not useful for lighting, and basically then you can use a balcony front to send rays. Additionally, what you kind of see here, the balcony fronts are not vertical. Here, this was a lucky coincidence. That was the plan of the architects anyways. So by giving the right vertical inclination, you can actually literally shoot sound to the correct positions. Now that's for a source on stage. So the lower ones actually do reflection to the audience, especially where it's very difficult to get to, which is the sides of the first part of the parterre. The rear is actually done with the sidewalls. Then that one shoots to the first balcony, and the second one to the second balcony. That's for a source in the orchestra pit. So actually what you can even do is there is sound back to the orchestra pit and a very efficient reflection coverage of sidewall reflections to all of the main floor parterre. So I think that's kind of a nice opening statement. Don't be blunt and say you need all of it. Yes, lighting designers need lighting position, but please share some of the square meters you have with the acoustic designer so that we can actually do good sound as well. And that's, I think, generally the idea how we like to design rooms, how we like to move forward with rooms, understanding how the theater technology can be used or how the theater technology can be integrated within the reflection surfaces we are creating. I sometimes like using that slide. That's a hall we did in China. That's the Fujo Opera House and Concert Hall. So here, this is actually the Opera House. And you all think this is just a wild architectural impression. Fujo is the city of porcelain. So what you actually see, all of these walls are small porcelain mosaics. And you think it's the wild design of an architect that went wild in Rhino, which they did. But luckily, we are using Rhino as well. So it's not just the architect doing the Rhino, it's us doing the Rhino as well and exchanging the files. So when you actually look at another image, that's a computer rendering of the acoustic coverage. So that's a source on stage, and shaping these walls allows you to create reflections to, once again, the main floor, the balcony, and the top balcony. And that's the one I like. It's actually, it's the superposition of, on the left side, it's the real image. So basically behind the architectural image, there's an acoustic grid. There is an acoustic backbone that makes the whole work. In this image, what you can't see, what you can actually imagine is on that bit, which is not green, that's not useful acoustically. And of course, that is where the lighting position is integrated. So we actually shaped the surfaces around the lighting bridges, kind of moving the lighting positions a little bit, but within the limits of what is possible for lighting. When you then shape what happens around the lighting positions, you can actually do very efficient reflections. Here we just go back to the room. The interesting one is here, it's all the visible surfaces that you see that do the acoustic work. Yes, the backside, the side wall inside these loges, and we're actually using the hole even to send reflections through the hole to the other side. But in this project, it's all visible. There's yet another possibility, that's the new theater in Geneva, which has just opened. So all of this is still semi-unofficial. But here it's acoustically transparent, all this golden, it's wire mesh. It's very, very open acoustically. It's still visually present, as you can see. You don't really understand what happens behind. But here, that was the architect's idea to do this origami, this sculpted polyhedron as the surface of the whole, which we then used. And actually the real reason was they had an old one, which was much more coherent between architecture and acoustics. So once again, all the visible surfaces were doing the reflections. But the thing that really bothered them, that they couldn't continue it until the proscenium because of the side lighting positions. So the users, the technical director and the lighting people cut holes into their finishes, and that's what they didn't want. But that's the new concept then. It's acoustically transparent finishes with actually lots of lighting positions in these holes that are not visible from the audience. Good, so for lighting, this is relatively easy. Give us some space and we'll give you some lighting positions. The second part of the lighting is much more complicated, is lights tend to make noise and moving lights tend to do a lot of noise. And that's another point. Basically, be careful with your lights that they increase background noise. But I actually wanted to jump on what Nicole said. It's the variable acoustics requirements. And here I'm not even talking about wild things like going from cinema to movies or amplified music to church music. It's already in a theater. For me, a theater is already a multi-purpose room by definition. You will understand I'm gradually going on to the loudspeakers. This is the German DIN norm. Forget all this German, but basically A2 says speech. And that's kind of the optimized or the ideal value of the reverberation time as a function of volume. But what does speech mean? Is speech amplified speech or is speech unamplified speech? And if you look into both the recommendations that are then in the text, and if you look in what experience says and what Congress venues say, speech is speech, non-amplified. Amplified speech is actually much more the green line. It's what here is called A3, which is communication, but that's what we find a much more appropriate setting for amplified speech or all kinds of amplified speech and music. So already in the same theater, you have two different acoustic requirements. And we've done quite a lot of thinking about how we can in parallel optimize both for natural speech and for amplified speech. Some of it is basically, you see it from here, we can shoot rays from different positions, and we know the fact that the loudspeaker is much higher up in the room. So you can actually do things like optimizing surfaces for the natural speech and not using them, or rather optimizing them only for sources in the lower half of the room. That then helps to not use them for amplified events. So that's number one. And normally, basically, when it's the last theater that you've seen that does not use loudspeakers, and I'm not saying when it's the last theater show that you've seen that doesn't use loudspeakers, but theaters, we basically find that every theater we are doing is at least doing shows with amplification. There may be some theaters that actually hardly ever do non-amplified, but most do both. So you have to take both into consideration. And then one, Thor's not in there this time, but Thorsten, you will laugh. Yeah. So that basically was Oslo that Thorsten knows quite well. That is a typical built speech theater that nobody can fill any longer. I mean, half, if you're talking about it in Oslo, it's exactly that. In Oslo, it's very much that the theater actors are the same as the TV actors. And the nasty saying is that they all lost their voice because they have too many TV engagements. But I think for me, another point is you do not do the very classical staging any longer, where when it gets important, the actor is in the middle of the forestage and proclaims his speech to the audience. The moment you're talking about whispering facing the back of the stage, that's just another requirement. So life has become much tougher towards speech and stability. Oslo is another example. It's much tougher as well. The background noise is significantly higher than it was 50 years ago. It's pretty shocking for an acoustician who always works on making life quieter, but in theater, it's basically not the case. 50 years ago, we were battling with, or not me, but my predecessors were battling with ventilation systems. Nicole, I think you agree. In a theater, we rarely have a problem with the ventilation system. We have problems with smoke machines, dimmer racks that are, oh, we need temporary dimmer racks that need to be on the lighting bridges in the house, or moving lights. So basically, the background noise in Oslo is very, very audible. So whispering is a problem. And I don't know whether you still were there, that what I found most frustrating is the interaction between the loudspeakers and the acoustic environments. In this room, you speak clearly facing the audience. Speech intelligibility is actually better for the non-amplified speech than for the amplified speech. And the reason is that these loudspeakers are too close to reflective surfaces. So they're actually fire into resonating surfaces, and they're creating their own nasty reflections. We tried it, we pushed these loudspeakers more to the center line, and it became much better. So that's what I meant, is to what degree do we have to integrate loudspeakers into our future theater designs? And what does it actually mean? So that's a contemporary one, that's Clermont. That's the view from the stage. Once again, for naturally non-amplified voice, we have vertically inclined all of these bands. There is very beautiful reflections to basically every seat. So you can actually speak and you can be understood. And we were there for a dance show where there was actually, mostly it was amplified music, but there was some speaking, and the speaking could be understood as long there's not enough music. But then the moment there is music, you need the amplification. Good, that's the side view. And what you can actually see is the very nice wide proscenium. It's close to 20 meters wide. Dancers love it. But that's the problem. If you're having a 20, or it's 19-meter wide proscenium, here, the loudspeakers that were used is the Föhn line arrays. Many people say they're ideal for speech because you can do the directivity. Here it was Duqueflech with a heavily amplified semi-rock band. They were touching their limits, but it's clear. A theater nowadays needs amplification, and it needs a lot of amplification. Where and how do you integrate them? And that's what I kind of, my summary is, who should design the loudspeakers? Both where they are, what they are. Discussing with the mixer of the dance show, actually, one of the biggest problems for him was he's more and more used to using immersive systems. So not only having left, right, but being able to put sources in the center. Where do you put a center loudspeaker in this proscenium design? These two fill in the gaps, but they're not a separate channel. If ever, which I see, we are going more and more immersive, it means a lot. It means either you hang the loudspeakers inside the proscenium opening. Micah and others, happy architects. I have some horrible photos on my nasty book, how horrible loudspeakers can get. We do not want to have 5 other line arrays hanging in the middle of this proscenium, but where else do we put them? What does it mean to the forestage? There's a whole set of integration questions then. So it's the integration, it's the interaction with the room and the room finishes. Like here, we've actually made these side lighting positions. There's reflectors, but for the rest, we have made the side lighting positions as absorbing as possible, so that the spill out of the loudspeakers to the sides is absorbed as much as possible to get the loudspeakers as clean as possible. And what you probably didn't get either is, do we design new rooms for loudspeaker systems that exist now or that will exist in 2-3 years? Knowing that hopefully the lifespan of our theater is 50 or 100 years, where the lifespan of the loudspeaker system is, how much should we say? 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years? I would say somewhere between 10 and 20. And on a positive note, Nicole said all the nice things about variable acoustics, and I fully agree that I try to avoid electronic solutions, but more and more I'm fascinated in using them partially. Because if we actually have an immersive system that does the front and that does a bit of surround, it can be part of the solutions to automatically integrate variable acoustics. And basically, we need to design something that is open for development, because if you look back over the last 10 years, how big the evolution is with loudspeaker systems, the next 10 years will have yet another major development. So the one I know is, in order to do it well, it's collaboration and working together. The more interesting question is, who should in the future be designing the loudspeakers? Should it be the architect? Should it be the theater planner? At least for me as an acoustician, I hate drawing loudspeaker cable diagrams. So that one I leave happily to somebody else. But it is true. we are kind of needed in the coordination and in the integration.
Eckhart, I really hate to interrupt you, but I think we have till 4 o'clock now, so that's 4 more minutes.
That was the end of it.
Ah, very good. Sorry, that time. Are there any questions after this very informative, or Nicole, do you want
Yes.
to react on Eckhart?
John has a question.
Ah, John.
I have a question. I have a question for both Nicole and Eckhart. Are we now going to have, I'm a theatre operator as well as a number of other things. Are we going to have a position called Director of Acoustics? Who is going to understand these systems? Who is going to train people to use them? And am I just going to be able to go to a screen and just type in acoustic number 4 and then it happens? Or is it going to be a system which runs me rather than me running it? That's it.
The clear answer is nobody wants the last one. That was Zoom throwing us out. Huh? We don't like that one. We want to be the master of the systems and not the systems the master of us. On the other hand, you engage theater directors and set designers, and that includes sound designers, and they have their ideas. And basically they come back to us, and one nasty comment I heard was kind of a few months ago, when it was back to exactly left-right stereo, I have the impression of going 15 years back. So I don't really know. Sometimes left and right is nice and easy, or I can be even more blunt. Acoustics is the one thing that never changes. As long as you can deal with natural acoustics, there's no button you need.
Yes.
Yeah, but to make it variable, it's a different story. And it's a good question, because some features actually that are designed to make, for example, the acoustics variable. And then sometimes if you go back to the specific venue, you go to a theater, to a performance, and then you think these variable acoustics should be applied in this situation. And then you see a different configuration actually. So it's really, we also discussed it, how to be sure that all these features and design tools are really implemented in the right way actually. But it's still not, we still don't have the answer really.
I mean, I've known some theatres where, bless them, the resident staff don't even understand the heating system, let alone the acoustics.
It's very often years later, different people work there, and they have lost the manual for the acoustic settings.
Yeah. But what are we going to do? And who is going to take a lead in this? This is the
education.
That's why I say, who's going to train people? Who's going to train the directors of acoustics?
Can I interrupt in that and answer some? Okay, the two examples that you give between the line array system and then the column system, the best solution right this minute, which is a new technology, is from 5 years now, is the immersive. Think about the sphere around your head and installing a smaller speakers, not as big size as the line array system or the column. So smaller speakers in 360 degrees, in every axe on those 360 degrees in the whole auditorium will create the same sound pressure that you're trying to integrate from a bigger sound speaker, okay? And then feeding the signal into that sphere with every point will deliver the maximum pressure that you need to every audience in every space. And you don't need to reach your limits, as you say, either on the column or the bigger line array system. The bigger line array system originally designed for flood sound, which is outside, outdoor speakers. And today technology, they trying to even those designs to make it smaller systems, not as big as shown in the example. So the immersive system is, with this sphere, is the best to not, we still have the left and right, and we have plus points onto that you do have the movement, that our ears can hear it. Like, for example, the movement from not just the left and right, the movement from here, the movement from here, the movement from here, and in front of you. And it creates also that 3D as we human being listening. And again, you don't need from that, you distribute the speaker, and you don't need to push the speaker limit or the system limit. And that's why nowadays, every company is creating their simulation system for speakers that gonna be installed, because you do the acoustic measurements first in that design of sphere, and then it tell you your limit is that in that sphere. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bassam. Well, one short reaction from Eckhard or Nicole on this? Or are we then getting too deep into the loudspeaker techniques?
I think we are getting to the open question. That is, from my experience as well, where things are heading, but it does not make life easier.
Okay.
Yeah, and the directivity is, of course, more and more systems are omnidirectional from all sides. And sometimes you hear, yeah, also voices not only coming from the stage anymore, but also from sides. Actually, it's not, you shouldn't expect it. So the system really should be, set to the performance that is on the stage. And so I'm wondering if this directivity of the sounds is really implemented in these systems correctly.
Yeah, yes, it is. Because every sound source, when you system design, every sound source that you put in the drawings, it tells you exactly where it's gonna fit. Similar to the slide number 13 or 14 about in Eckhard presentation. I was gonna ask if we're gonna use the bigger line array system with the mosaic reflections that built it in the Chinese. How you gonna try to know the reflection coming from the speaker or the reflection coming from the walls to the audience ears? But for this, for the directional of the signal, you can do that in the system design. Because speakers, most of the small speakers, it's like either 60 to 120 angle or 90 to 110 angles. So you can really direct it to a certain row of the audience. Plus, you can really direct it to a certain point in the sphere that you creating above your of your head.
Just one comment, which, I mean, a lot of it is just too detailed. The question for the entire group for me is, this has implications to layouts of seats in theaters.
Yes.
Because basically, you don't want to have a loudspeaker too close to you. And
no, it's in the grid. It's put in the grid. Creating this sphere is totally on the grid, is not next to your ears.
Yes, which basically.
No, but the thing is that what Eckhard showed also, and is that we have this big units of loudspeakers, and you say it's going to be smaller and smaller, so that will be nice, but Eckhart's point is that it has to be designed. And I think that's something true, and whether it's the architect or another kind of designer, but you have to take count of it, of the techniques and how it looks like and how it influences your space.
The bigger one are made for outdoor. I can show examples.
I also had a question for you, because you spoke a lot about the reflections and how you get the sound where you wanted to have it, but you didn't say so much about absorption. Is it something?
Half because I don't care about it as an acoustic designer. Basic absorption is when something doesn't get somewhere. Reflection is when something is useful.
Yes.
So yes, I agree that every now and then we do need absorption, but actually you think about it, in a classical concert hall, there is no absorption other than the audience. And in historic theaters, there is very little absorption other than the audience. There are some curtains around the royal boxes, but only the royals get the absorption of kind of some free. The top balcony, normally it's all painted. It's all cardboard or wood, and it's the audience that absorbs. Yes, we agree in a big black box we need, but that's kind of more special cases.
What do you think about that, Nicole?
Yeah. First, we want to use the useful reflections, and then if we have surfaces that can't be put to use, then we can absorb there.
Yeah, for speech, I totally agree. You want to use the positive reflections and only avoid negative reflections or late reflections that can disturb actually the speech intelligibility. But yeah, that is, it also depends on the function of the hall or of the performance. That is, and so if you have, for example, music, amplified music, then reflections mostly are negative. So then you want to absorb it as most as possible.
And I had one question for you. You showed us some different, I don't remember the name, reverberation time.
Yeah.
That you could lower or raise it a little bit. But you showed also that for the symphony music you needed 2 seconds roughly. But were you able to reach that too in the example of Taipei, for example?
No, because that's one of the things I wanted to show you, that it's really difficult to meet all the acoustic requirements that are related to the functions. So if you want to use the hall for symphonic music as well as for amplified theater, then the difference, for example, in acoustic requirements is really big. And such a big difference is very hard to solve by varying the volume or the sound absorption of a combination of it. So then you can also think about the electronic amplified systems as well to make larger differences. But of course, so you have to really see what's the balance and of course, how many times the symphonic music events will take place. If it's only a few times a year, then it's also related to costs. So what is, what's the best balance actually to reach in the end? But just by varying the volume and the sound absorption, it's actually impossible to make this big range of acoustic requirements.
Okay, I think because people are leaving now that we have to wrap up. And I really would like to thank you for your stories. And like Louis said, when we just came back, I just started to understand a little bit more of it now. And well, thank you for it, and thank you for your time. And yeah, hope to see you again.
Thank you as well. It was a
everybody.
Thank
pleasure.
you. Bye-bye.
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 Thanks.